Thank you. In regards to those who have had taken Mefloquine and trying to determine who had done that, I did an order paper question asking specifically in regards to Canadian Armed Forces members who were required to take Mefloquine since 1990, so required, how many were required to take Mefloquine by deployment, country of deployment, dates and whatnot. I got results, so these are individuals required by Canadian Armed Forces from 2003 up to 2018. And they indicated here that we now recommend it as a second-line medication. What I've heard today is that it shouldn't be in a line of medication choices at all, correct? Yeah, just a quick yes or no? Nods?
Agreed.
Yes.
Agree.
Okay. They continue to review all scientific literature on Mefloquine to ensure our policies remain current. Clearly they didn't, because as it was mentioned in the meeting we had with our top bureaucrats, they weren't aware of the Australian report. Anti-malaria medication is recommended when personnel deploy to areas where there's a concern for contracting malaria. They name some countries. Afghanistan isn't on this list. It's a desert country, and our armed forces were required to take it there. Does that make sense to you? Just a yes, no, and a very brief. No.
No.
Not
No.
shaking heads, no. Okay. The Canadian Armed Forces recommended Mefloquine as an option since the early 1990s. Option, and yet there were other choices, and it indicates that it was the patient's choice. But we know in 1992, tens of thousands of free Mefloquine tablets were made available to the Canadian Armed Forces troops deployed in Somalia as part of a clinical trial. Now, our Surgeon General in his 2017 report said the Canadian Armed Forces members deploying to Somalia did not participate in the SMS study since the guidelines of the study were not compatible with the operational requirement to deploy to Somalia. And yet, that was the drug that they were ordered to take and had to use the entire time that they were there. Is that not, in your mind, some kind of a moral or legal breach when you are requiring, demanding that they have to take that drug, and yet it was not followed through with as a study in the way that it was intended to be used? Any comments on that?
I'm not familiar with the details of that particular study or the circumstance. I did read that in the report. It did strike me as a bit unusual because of its absence of any detail about why it was incompatible and so forth. So it seems a bit unusual, but I have no knowledge of it.
So it wasn't compatible to go ahead with the study regardless. Dr. Quinn, anything? And yet they were still given a drug that was not licensed and was supposed to be used as a...
Yeah, I think it's an very extraordinary situation. And obviously has had significant and lasting ramifications for the Canadian military and all those involved at that time. I think the other point is that there is no such thing as informed consent in military populations, and therefore the use of military veterans or military members in clinical trials is a significant issue.
Our Surgeon General also made it clear in his report where they made it, we were told, a last line of defense, and in here they say a second line of defense, that it in no way, their decisions in regards to the military in no way implicated or impacted in any way the use of it amongst civilians in Canada. And this deeply disturbs me. You mentioned that the drug labeling isn't a good way to inform. We know that our medical practitioners, a lot of them are not informed about the dangers of this drug. And all kinds of Canadian civilians travel internationally to areas where there is malaria. So what would your perspective be on this drug being used within our civilian population?
It's widely becoming a drug that is less and less prescribed by general travel doctors and other general practitioners. I think the international exposure of the impact on individuals has caused a significant downturn in its use, but that should really have been driven by the drug regulators from a safety perspective, and I think that has been a significant shortfall in the way that this drug the drug's history has played out over time, that the regulators have not performed their duties appropriately.
Okay, Dr. Sellers?
I mean, if you go on the internet or you go and look at any of the guidelines, the drug of first choice is Malarone. It's a combination drug. It's also quite expensive.
It is, that's interesting, because cost seems to have played a factor, at least a partial factor, in even with our armed forces. The cost of a once-a-week Mefloquine pill versus the cost of the others is significantly different, correct? Just a yes or no? So,
Yes, it
Yes.
is.
So I do want to bring attention to Australia again, because I have a friend, a veterans advocate on Mefloquine, who took it, her and her husband, when they weren't deployed, they were civilians on a trip to Thailand. And she had trouble before she even left home, and the doctor said, just keep taking it, you'll get used to it. And it was the Australian backpackers that told them to get off of this drug, and she suffered all of her life, and we lost her last December. So this is why it concerns me for our civilian population as well, that education needs to be out there.
Ms. Blaney?
There's ample evidence that the civilian population is affected by this drug. It's just as Professor Quinn has said.
Thank you.
Thank you.